Hello and welcome to the Westford DEI Committee's podcast that we call Inclusive Conversations. I'm Joe Diamond, co-chair of the committee, and I'm joined by...
I'm Wendy Gloyd, the co-vice chair of the DEI committee. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Wendy. And our special guest is Ellen Rainville, who is the library director in Westford. And we're going to talk all things library today. As you all know, the DEI Committee's main goal is to foster a sense of belonging, to celebrate diversity, inclusion, and libraries play a big role in all of that. There is one thing I did want to note about librarians, I must say, that lately, the last 10 years or so, there are movies that depict librarians as superheroes, and I think that's apt. And at some point, Ellen, you're going to have to tell us what your superpower is.
Okay. Well, certainly inclusion, when you think about something like the Dewey Decimal System, which is imagining that it can classify, catalog, organize systematically, and arrange in some logical order all of the known knowledge and information in the universe, then clearly we have a lot of pretensions to inclusion in the library world. The whole idea of the public library, which is a uniquely American democratic institution, is that for free you can avail yourself of information and knowledge, and you can be part of an informed and responsible civic democracy. This was absolutely the intention here in Westford. Right after our Westford militia went to the Battle of Lexington and conquered, they returned to their community and they settled and founded Westford Academy in 1792. And those original trustees, one original trustee insisted that his daughter be educated, so it was coeducational from 1792, one of the oldest in the nation. And 5 years later, they founded the Social Library, which was a subscription library, and that was the foundation of our current library. Oh. By 1859, that was given to the town. And that was long before Massachusetts law allowed public tax-supported libraries. That law came into being in 1840. And Boston was one of the first tax-supported libraries in the nation. But I think a fun fact that I love to share is that the town of Franklin, which is often boasting its place as the first public library, having named themselves after Benjamin Franklin, wrote to him and requested that he gift a bell to the town. But what he sent back instead was a core library collection telling them that sense was more important than sound. So that's the basis of their collection in the town of Franklin, Massachusetts.
I'm so glad there's a connection to Ben Franklin, having been born near Philadelphia. It's great to hear, but not surprised, however.
No. Completely a self-made, self-educated man. Mm-hmm. I mean, a real icon of that possibility. He was an indentured printer. He ran away. He created a future for himself. He became an international figure and certainly a founding father. So that was the promise of America.
How long have you been with the Westford Library?
So I'm in my 53rd year.
Oh my goodness.
So I started at $2.18 an hour as a summer college job and did everything and enjoyed everything about it. And even as I continued through college, I worked part-time at the library. I was so blessed to have been hired by a very progressive library director who canceled fines way back in the 1970s. For other libraries across the country, that's a new accessibility issue. They're getting rid of fines, but Westford has been without fines for 75 years. And the 70s was a wonderful time because it had a huge publishing boom. And you may remember, there were so many I'm going to say, new areas. There was Native American literature, there was women's literature, there was ecology, there was Mother Earth news. It was just an incredibly active and rewarding time to start out in libraries. And I got hooked.
And the library is where it is now, yes?
That's correct.
Okay.
So the library building on the Common actually was the gift of J.V. Fletcher. He gave $14,000 in 1895. The town matched that with $5,000. And Westford was his summer home. He was a banker in Belmont. And so this was his special benefaction, as a donor to his native home. And Westford has been so fortunate, over time to avail itself of a number of either federal or state grants. There was a federal funded edition in 1969. Actually, J.V. Fletcher's great-granddaughter did a renovation of the basement for a children's room in 1963, so that was a gift from her. Then there was a federal grant for an edition in 1969. We had a state grant for a bookmobile in the 70s. And then now you'll see that the library is fenced off as a construction site. We have a $7.8 million grant with an additional $830,000 of state grant funds promised. And we are under internal demolition now, and we hope to be moving back into the library in January or February of 2027. So the library will be promising all kinds of things, that are wonderful but constrained space could not quite offer. So we'll go from 22,500 square feet to slightly over 35,000 square feet. And we'll have 2 additional meeting rooms. We'll have a dedicated children's program room. We'll have a mother's or caregiver's comfort room in the children's area and a neurodiverse corner. We'll have multiple restrooms. We'll have an adult-sized changing table in one restroom with restrooms on every floor. And we have continually said as we promoted this, and it has been voted on by the Westford townspeople since 2012, this design is about putting the public back in public library. It's much more, especially as we transition to more downloadable and virtual and non-print, non-hard collections. It's about space for the public. Children, students, people convening, and again, we're true to all of those roots. We're about freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, freedom of expression. You have all of these rights embedded in the democratic public library.
And as part of the Commission on Disability, I've met with you in your panel as you were showing the designs, and it was really impressive how much has already been built into the design of the building for the elevators to be more accessible, to have the correct signage.
Yes.
That is easily read by folks of all different vision
It's a
areas.
a very complex and multi-layered design effort, and I'm very grateful for the professionalism of everyone involved in the product. The project, it's about handrails that are brushed rough, braille signage, colors that can be differentiated. Now we're still just starting on this, but websites also have to be more accessible. There's a real push. It will finally be a large enough elevator that a gurney will fit in it. One of the true traits of this new design is it will be more flexible. So as libraries continue to change, and right now, at times 30 to 35% of our circulation is virtual. children's circulation has not changed that much. It's still very much hands-on, take 15 books out every week. But, we really see the difference for a number of our student and adult readers. But, as someone who reads on a Kindle, large font, white font, black background, people with all kinds of reading needs, can use our virtual downloadable collections, or we can send the homebound librarian to you. We can connect you with the Perkins School for the Blind, which will let you use their collection for any kind of reading challenge that you might have, including youngsters with dyslexia. You can borrow their books on tape, which are a much more rugged, heavy-duty version of what we have had in the public library up to now. So that's all so exciting because it's 24/7. If you decide at midnight on Saturday night you want to download a book or watch a film or, download an audiobook, all you need is your library card, and we will make sure that you can have it.
Would you say that, or let me ask you this, how does the library, as it's developing, by the way, I drove by on the way here, and I could see right through,
Yes.
and it was a little bit shocking, but exciting at the same time. And certainly the new library will expand the possibilities.
Yes.
You've explained your history, which is amazing, 53 years, and you started, it sounds like you started with the library, your professional
About
life.
18. Well, I was the student help who would work any
Yeah.
hours, any nights, every Saturday. That's how I started. And I think, the question is, why did I stay when I might have been a musician and was, majoring in philosophy and then English literature. And I didn't know myself at that point that for a happy career life, I needed a job that had an incredible amount of diversity, one of our favorite words. And that, that's true. Sometimes you're singing in Mother Goose, sometimes you're doing an Excel spreadsheet, sometimes you're writing a job description, sometimes you're on the website. I didn't know that for me to be happy in my work, I would need a constant set of new horizons and new skills and pursuits that would keep me from being bored. I love to tell about, the woman that I saw on one early news show, and her job had been to put the eyes on the peeps as they came down the conveyor belt. And she had done this for 40 years, 2 tiny little black dots. But she was passionate about it. She said, if you got them wrong, your peep didn't look right. But I just have to say, that's the opposite end of the spectrum from what I needed in a job.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you this. You've explained a little bit of your motivation. You must have had, or I continue to have, a vision for the library in Westford as it will develop. Is it headed in that direction? Is it sort of meeting all of your hopes?
Yes, I think that Westford is changing. I think the important thing about every public library, and our vision and mission statement says this, is you're responsive to and reflective of your community.
Mm-hmm.
For example, before World War I, when we had quite an influx of White Russians from Russia, our first, significant immigration group, we had Russian books from BPL that we made available to our Russian patrons. Now we're really trying hard to do programming that's inclusive, more Chinese programming, more Indian, collect Indian authors. We are able to, we're still able to get deposit foreign collections from Boston Public Library. We'll have more space for that when we get back into our new building. But I think the mission, Westford has been a young town, and by this I mean a large percentage of our population is under age 19.
Mm-hmm.
This is one reason we have a high circulation. We have had circulations of 415,000 things a year, 770 people a day through the building. That's not what we're seeing at our temporary site, but that's been our past statistic. But one of my biggest goals is that children will love the library and learn to love reading.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what we want, because it opens the door to so much afterwards. And, I would say, if your child wants to listen to a book, that's fine. If they want to read Marvel comics, as my brothers did, that's fine. If they want to read graphic novels, that's fine. Occasionally a mother will say, well, he only reads nonfiction. And I'm saying he may only read nonfiction for the rest of his entire life, but that's okay. As long as they are reading, we want them to be excited about reading and have that skill that they can develop lifelong, into further curiosity, further development, further mastery of whatever is in their future.
And in that point, in talking about the different ages that the library is helpful for, the library was so helpful for me in 2009 when myself and a couple of other folks founded the Westford Job Seekers Group with the help of Dina Canabar. It was so critical to us at that point when so many technology folks were getting laid off, needed to figure out how to remarket ourselves in this new job world.
And have a support.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an amazing story because it was a weekly support group that was always well attended, sadly so well attended, and was so critical for the continued self-esteem and the future placement of attendees in new jobs. And Dina managed to get free speakers for 9 years in and out. We managed a free library program with free speakers, who came just with the object of helping people retrain, redevelop, and re-land a job. And it was such a challenging time because so many people, who had never had a doubt that they would be employed their entire life, all of a sudden were out of work for 12 months, 18 months. It was so scary, especially, because of the higher the age, the scarier it was.
And I know Dina went to a lot of educational forums for librarians to teach them what she was doing so that they could try to implement something similar in their locale.
Right. So, as we look at some of the federal funds that, are now tied up and not coming to libraries across the nation, some of those critical databases, which really are subscription services to what used to be, the hundreds of reference books that we bought, now they're online, they're called databases, and those were really critical to job searches, learning about companies, learning about, the directories, who should you reach out to, who should you follow up with, all of that was very critical, and we're losing some of that as of July 1, and we're very hopeful that we will be able to get some funding back to the Institute of Museum and Library Services.
It's interesting, Wendy's reflected a little bit on her experience with the library. When I was in high school, a teacher said to us right before freshman year summer, I don't care what you read, just read. And so he actually, first thing he said was comic books.
Yep.
So
Yep.
he said he said your minds right now are like sponges. And I remember in high school, but in particular in college, with big research projects, going to the librarian, not only getting help with helping me to understand the topic I thought I understood, but through a series of questions, really helping me understand what I was looking for, and then helped me to figure out where to look and how to look. That was always a little bit daunting. But so I have such enormous respect for and sort of warm feelings for librarians over the years who've really helped me to understand what it is I was after and then how to look it up.
Now the issue is almost, as we all know who've done a Google search, too many responses. Now those are the days when I started where, we knew where to look and we knew what book it was in, and we were the guide dogs. We were the Saint Bernard dog with the whiskey barrel, helping you through the snow to your research project.
Right.
But now it's how do you siphon out the incorrect information, the false information, the misguiding or downright wrong information. So it's, every librarian would say that the internet, the ability to look something up in an instant, it's a wonderful thing. But it also returns a fire hose worth of information to you, and so librarians are still needed, to help you go through that and really siphon out the wheat from the chaff, so to speak.
To get to the original source,
Yes,
really.
yes.
I mean, I think that's
Not every
still
source
the key.
is, as
Right.
I think we all know, but some people find that out the hard way. Not every source is a reliable and correct source.
We do want to get to actually a question that I think might be important to you, and that is how people can continue to support the construction of the new library.
Yes.
And sort of learn about how that works. But I have a couple questions. Are you good for the moment?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the legislation that we were talking about in the lobby.
Yes.
That's offered by Rep. Moran and Senator Sear.
Yes, so there was a congressional hearing this Tuesday afternoon, and two major groups of bills were being brought forth with testimony. One was e-books and downloadable materials, and the right for public libraries and libraries in general to have a commission to represent them. At this point, while if I bought you a hard copy of a book, I could get a 46% off discount, catalog it, and circulate it until it fell apart, libraries pay 6 times more for a downloadable title than you might buy from Amazon or through Kindle.
Wow.
And often the publishers are limiting either the number of circulations on that title or it disappears after 24 months. So this is not obviously what we want for our public shared resources. Connecticut has just passed a bill, challenging this, and the bill in front of the Massachusetts legislature, hopefully it will be referred out for action, would create a commission to look into this and help librarians and libraries, work to reverse this. The other group, there was a group of slightly different but all or I would say same purpose bills, has to do with access to books and being sure that books remain on the shelves, that professional librarians and school library teachers choose them under an established and approved collection development policy, that if there is a question about whether the books are appropriate, it's always understood that parents have the right of control over their children's reading, and that there be a process for the book to be examined and assessed. Regrettably, there's also language that is more protective of librarians in both schools and public institutions for performing the duties that their professional degree confers upon them, and that they've been hired to perform, because there are strong pushes across the United States now that threaten librarians or collections. And so this is protective language we hope will be referred out to the floor this year, and that hopefully it will be passed and adopted. And and potentially be a sample, a sterling example for other states and commonwealths across the U.S. to follow. One of the testifying politicians did note that of all professions, librarians have the highest voting record. So I think that.
Oh, really?
Yes. So.
As a member of the LGBTQ community, I will say that it's so important for books, especially for youth, to see themselves represented in the books available in the library. And with the current federal legislation mentioning only 2 genders, it's important for these youth to know that there is gender diversity. It exists in nature. It exists all over the world. It's not abnormal, because it's so important to protect our children. It's not putting ideas in their minds. It's allowing them to not feel like they're a Martian on planet Earth, that there are other non-binary or gender diverse folks. It's
an interesting. The argument against diversity seems to fly in the face of all known facts and observations. I mean, there is nothing but diversity. Any parent or caregiver would tell you that their children are as different as can be, and I think that one of my favorite, maybe this. I don't know why this always rings for me, but one of my favorite quotes from Einstein was, our biggest delusion is that there are boundaries between things. So we are all one. I think that the purpose of reading and studies show, youngsters reading about someone who's not like themselves. It promotes empathy, it promotes understanding, it promotes curiosity about different people, different areas of the world, different notions. It's developmental, and it widens horizons. If you're reading about the boxcar children, you don't want to be an orphan on a boxcar. You're understanding that, you're understanding the hardships and the challenges of another human being, and it is awakening in you some understanding that the world actually is diverse. Not everyone's experience, not everyone's reality is like your own, and that's an important lesson, and it's a lesson, I would say to many a parent, I would much rather learn certain hard lessons through a book that I can put down when it makes me uncomfortable, or not read if I don't like it. I'd much rather be learning about some of the hard realities of the world on the printed page or the audio page, than have it be my, own hard learned experience. So there's so much in the universal library of ideas, and there's so much for us to learn and to appreciate in each other, and in ourselves.
I was talking to my wife and others about this conversation today, and folks were just reflecting on their experience in libraries at a young age. And I found that, and in some conversations, that being in the library and then being able to find the books that might be of interest help you to relate in a way that you might not be able to without having the experience of reading the story, and help you to sort of understand yourself a little bit better, or to crystallize certain aspects of your personality which you really quite haven't had a chance to sort of interrogate yourself. Right. I remember reading a book about Teddy Roosevelt and being impressed with his activism and progressivism. Mm-hmm. I said, well, that is kind of what I believe, but I wasn't really sure what to call it, or there wasn't really a name for it in my mind. And so I'm sure that experience exists, for many, many people.
Right, we're pinging off, this new exposure, and we're learning about ourselves. I think one of the wonderful things about the free library for the youngest, the preschooler, choosing your own book, it's an active adult agency, and you can do that because there's no commerce involved. You can just walk up to the shelf and choose as many as your parent will let you take home and read over and over and over again. And, that is an act of agency, and it's one of the first that, really is available to children. They can't drive themselves somewhere. You don't want them forever handing over money for things. So, it is definitely a place of discovery and a place of self-discovery. And I continue to hope, that libraries, again, the director who hired me was so, open-handed and progressive. My late husband, never forgave a former librarian for not letting him read The Last of the Mohegans. She didn't think at age 11 he was ready for it. So there's a book for every reader, and not every book is for every reader. And there are many, many more books than we'll all get to in our lifetimes. And we want to find them and have them be the transformative items that they actually can be within our lives.
We are very lucky to have you, Ellen, in Westford, and we're very excited for what's on the horizon.
New back to the building. Yes.
Indeed. How can we, more specifically, how can we in Westford continue to support the library?
So, first of all, I just have to thank, again, Westford voters, because since 2012, there have been 7 positive votes on the library
wow.
and this grant and the planning and design grant before it and the building that we're seeing in hand right now. So from the library website there, or from the Friends of the J.V. Fletcher Library website, Westford Library Friends, there is a foundation link. You can make a donation to their foundation. You can join 1,000 homes for $1,000 and get a sign on your lawn. You can give to the Fall Appeal. Any amount is welcome. At this point, the Friends have raised about $825,000 of the $1.3 million they hope to raise. And again, we have, we have another 16 to 18 months to go. Right now, to date, we've received 60% of our state-funded grant, library construction grant, made possible by the Board of Library Commissioners. This is a competitive grant round, so we competed with other towns and cities, and we waited for our turn to come up. So so far, that grant has paid for all costs. And as we work through the grant funding and get rebates from Massachusetts utilities in the future, and as the Friends continue to fundraise, it will actually hold down the cost to the Westford taxpayer. But the bond is 20 years, and, before we know it, our new building will be up, and we'll be there with multiple meeting rooms, lots of study space, 3 times the space for children and teens, and all the possibilities that, a fresh new facility will afford us.
What's the collection? How many books do you have in the library?
We usually say that we have about 100,000 items. More and more of those are virtual now. The children's collection is going to remain large because, again, that age group wants the illustrations, wants the book in hand. But we continue to build up our shared e-collections, and at this point we have a new plan where we can buy multiple copies of e-titles and make them available first just to Westford patrons. So if you aren't finding us at 515 Groton Road, or you find that a little out of your way, you're welcome to get these online. And we also, for the first time now, have a hot titles collection. Again, we know that we're having to go down to the basement stacks and ferry things upstairs for people, but we're buying 6 copies of every bestseller and putting it on the new bookshelf, so that when you walk in, you can instantly find a bestseller that hasn't got a hold on it. So we're trying to make the most of our temporary site.
I love the hot titles option, because a lot of times you're 20th on the list and you're waiting for it to come in.
Yes,
and
you can be like Christmas 2 years from now. Yeah.
So to just be able to walk in and no one, so they'll have certain titles that no one can put a reserve on. So you can go there knowing if it's got a hot title, you can take it home today.
Yeah. No wait.
Well, it's really exciting, and not that we're at all competitive in Westford, but I know that other communities have libraries that have been recently updated, and we're very excited to see it happen.
It's wonderful. New England has such a solid, robust library history. If you were in other parts of the U.S., you might see a county system or a far-flung system where a library is far away. You might live in unincorporated lands. It's something we can hardly even grasp up here in New England. But, New England has been fortunate in a great deal of benefaction, that late 19th century push to have public libraries on the green. It was a civic statement. It was a statement about prosperity and learning and equity through education. So we're really fortunate to have that. And Westford especially has had such a supportive community. And yes, they're beautiful. Littleton has a beautiful library, but libraries, are always organic things, and they have to keep moving and changing. But I think this new design is really going to hold us for quite a while, because it offers so much flexibility.
And I think a lot of people don't realize that you're custodians of the history of the town. When Leslie Howard was working on her project, once known as history of slavery in Westford, much of her research came from the documents that you folks store and take care of.
The same, I did talk and ask town voters at one town meeting to help preserve the journals of Westford's original Reverend Willard Hall. So Westford could not incorporate as a town without a called minister. So in 1725, Reverend Willard Hall, at that point a young man, was called, and in 1729 we were incorporated. And in our library preserved archives, we have the original incorporation document with the red wax stamp from King George III. So by the time Westford men were on the common, well, let me just back up. So we all remember, no taxation without representation. That was about tea. And the original Sam Adams, not the current brew house, but the original Sam Adams and the Sons of Liberty dressed up as Native Americans, and they threw 46 tons of tea in Boston Harbor, and in retribution, Britain blockaded the harbor. Nothing in, nothing out. So within a few weeks, this other document, which we have in the library archives, the Solemn League and Covenant, was read from every pulpit in Massachusetts, and it asks the males of the district not to engage in any British goods and not to have commerce with anyone who sold or engaged in British goods. In other words, a complete boycott of British goods. And every male in Westford signed except Reverend Willard Hall, who remained the staunch Tory to the very end. And it became quite bitter. I mean, I think about this now because the church is 300 years old, and we're at our 75th anniversary, 250th. So we're, the church was changing too, and they voted that he couldn't speak from the pulpit and he couldn't bring his firearm to church, which was the done thing at that point. And ultimately, he was the only man who, was not truly a revolutionary patriot of the period. At that point, he was in his 70s, and he is buried in Westford. He has a very prominent granite tabletop granite marker at Fairview Cemetery. But it's an interesting local look at a time which also, had strong divides and strong passions. But again, I have all this respect for those early Westford men because it's that vote for making Westford Academy coeducational that tells me they didn't just talk the talk, they walked the walk. When they were talking about equality, they really meant it, and they put it in the original foundational documents of Westford Academy.
So the library certainly is a keeper of our history, our values, and the future. We're really
Yes.
looking forward to this. And we would love to have you back, perhaps before the library opens
Sure,
again.
I'd love to come back.
But certainly when there's a grand opening.
Yes.
Time really flies. Thank you so much for being
Thank
here.
you for having me.
It was wonderful to have you, and thank you for sharing so much of the history. I remember you in the library forever. I never remember a time you weren't there. So,
Well, I've loved every minute of
Yeah.
it, and this is a really exciting time for me. It's a big project, and it's exciting, and it's going to offer so much to our community.
I think so too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.